Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the show. Today, we are going to take a more of a serious route than normally do on this podcast because it's September, and at date of filming, it is actually Labor Day. So, by the time this video comes out, it'll be hopefully September 11th, 2024. I hope you all had a wonderful Labor Day weekend and took advantage of the 3-day weekend. But with that said, let's get into today's topic. So, this will be my first real. I know I promised when I first started the show to talk more on history, more on like current events, and I know I filled it with a lot of gun content because that's for one, that's what I enjoy. Secondly, I've been struggling with what stuff I want to put on the show because my forte, I have a college degree in military history. And for some reason, military history intrigues me. But it's hard for me to make a video, I've tried to, that is not 2-3 hours long, talking about historical events. So today we are going to try to not do that, especially with something as serious as this. So, as I said, today we are talking about the 9/11 hijacking and attacks. And if that interests you, stick around. See you in a minute. Oh, good. You stayed. Let's start off with some of the real basic facts that we do know, that everybody should really know about 9/11. September 11th, 2001, the World Trade Center, the Pentagon, the White House almost were attacked by Al-Qaeda hijackers, 19 of them to be exact, armed with box cutters, and they're the reason why you can't walk through an airport with a 3-inch knife anymore. Little joke, but it's very serious. These guys were able to take over these airliners and pretty much guide them away from their destinations and to Tower 1, Tower 2 of World Trade Center, which at the time was we'll get into that in a minute, but another smaller one crashed into the side of the Pentagon, and in grand total, 2,977 people died, and within all the chaos, there was as high as 250,000 recorded casualties. That's insane. It has gone down in history as the worst invasion, if you want to. I would use the word invasionary attack on the United States soil. It was a terrorist attack. It was very clearly. There was no hiding it. Osama bin Laden was the orchestrator of it. For some reason, he got really popular again over the last couple of years because people finally read his letter to America, and the people that agree with him are idiots. The people that agree with him are willfully ignorant that this man says some things and that automatically makes him a good guy. Hitler said some good things too, but he was not a good guy. Sorry, that ticks me off a little bit. We didn't spend 20 years hunting him in a fucking desert for you guys to later idolize him, you Gen Zers and TikTokers and just all around. Like, you don't understand the issues that this guy caused while he was alive. Like, he is the reason why the Middle East is what the Middle East is now, if you look at the grand picture of things. Okay? And we'll get into that in a minute, but I want to go down the line of events here that happened. So, as we said, it was caused by bin Laden. His reasoning, as I pretty much just stated, was that he was a radical Muslim. He believed that the United States was the center of the West, which, I mean, we are. But more importantly, he thought that if he could make us collapse, the whole West would collapse, and it would pave the way for a new Muslim empire, which was his goal. His goal was to use Al-Qaeda to become the next Suleiman the Great or the next Ottoman Empire. He was enthralled with this idea, and he was not afraid to manipulate whoever he wanted to. He was not afraid to work both sides of the stick, so to speak. If you read up on your Cold War history, it was Osama bin Laden that helped us, the United States, get Russians out of Afghanistan and fight alongside the Mujahideen. And as with hindsight being 2020, that was a bad idea because we gave them training, we gave them weapons, we gave them pretty much ins and outs of United States military, which is why this attack was able to be so well coordinated, because they knew what to look for when trying to bypass security, creating the fake passports. We trained Al-Qaeda to do this. It was the United States, the CIA more specifically, and the Department of Defense that was able to allow 9/11 to happen in this weird way. I'm not saying they were directly involved. And as the video progresses, before I close out, I will talk about the conspiracy theories and why a lot of them are BS and why some of them are believable, and we will use history to track that. So, what caused it? Bin Laden. Why did he do it? Because he wanted to start a holy war with the United States. He wanted to essentially kill the United States, and for some perverse reason, he thought taking out one set of towers, which in his mindset I can understand, because Islam is a very backwards religion. They still hold to 8th century barbaric ideals, especially on the radical side. And New York City, if you were to just take yourself out of the equation of a Western civilization, throw yourself in a tent in the Middle East, and you're watching cable news, you would think that New York City was the capital of the United States. Just because that's where all the trade happens for the United States. That is where there's a lot of money in the United States, or in New York City. So he chose the World Trade Center because just like he chose the Pentagon, he chose the White House because it was a symbol of American power and dominance. Because we don't even know, so we're America, okay? There's no secret here. We are not only the military powerhouse of the world, but we are also the economic powerhouse of the world. That's why other nations look at us when they say, "Oh, what's America's economy going to do?" Because based on our economy is how other countries do financially. Like, that is how massive a scale that the United States has on the world. That's one of the reasons why when people tell me, "Oh, we need to be isolationist again," I agree. But unfortunately, we can't. We have put ourselves in the last 80 years in a situation to where we cannot be isolationist because everything we do affects the world. If we were to go in isolationist tomorrow, issues like we'll have 10 9/11s across the globe. It may be against us, it may be against Germany, France, England. Because if we were to withdraw all of our military power, all of our economic support, all of our fundamentals, essentially, we would open the world up to more 9/11 attacks. And that's why he chose the World Trade. We can obviously see why he chose the White House, home of the president, home of the leader of the free world. We can see why he chose the Pentagon, home of the military of the free world, United States military. Pretty much every major decision goes between the White House and the Pentagon. Those are very clear reasons. But the World Trade Center bombing, attacks, depending on how you want to look at it, that was as much as just to strike a heart in the symbol, and that was he knew there were going to be bodies, and that's how. So let's take a step back and put yourself in that mindset of 8th century barbarian. How do you win wars? You're not like the United States. Here in the United States, we believe in progressive wars. We believe in long-term, high impact wars. We believe in funneling we would much rather pay other countries to fight our battles for us, i.e. a good example of this, and it's not a bad thing, it's just how we do things now. A good example of this is early in Vietnam. We were sending military advisors to hopefully quell the situation in Vietnam. More modern day examples, we fund a lot of Israeli weaponry. We fund a lot of their R&D. But by keeping them the powerhouse in the Middle East, we don't have to have actual troops on the ground. That is America's biggest scare, and especially after the withdrawal from Afghanistan, I fear that's going to be something that the United States is going to be afraid to do from here on out, is having actual boots on the ground operations. You can see this also with Ukraine. We would much rather send them billions of dollars in equipment and weaponry than actually put our boots on the ground and end it fast. Because that's just how America fights. But you got to take that cap off and put the cap on of we can even take that as this mentality as far back as the 1800s. How do you win wars? You win wars by stacking bodies, by causing as much trauma as you can to the nation. Now, for us in the West, we learned that lesson from World War I and World War II. We don't want it, that's tragedy. We don't want that anymore. That is why we have the proxy war concept exists. But if you put that 8th century barbarian cap on, the way you win wars is shock and awe, body counts. I genuinely believe he attacked the World Trade Center. For one, it was the economic capital of the United States. That's a fact. But there's a lot of people that work in there. He could not have guesstimated I read off the stat earlier. It was close to 3,000 deaths. If you count the hijackers, I don't want to count the hijackers. They were not Americans. They were not, they don't deserve the respect of being accounted in that death toll. And then you got another 25,000 wounded between firefighters, police that were handling the situation, nurses, civilians walking through the streets when that happened, or people living in the residential buildings nearby. It worked out better than he ever thought, because there was a lot of collateral damage with the tear down of the World Trade Center. Now, while we're talking about the sequence of events, now we know why he did it, how he did it. But as you've noticed, I've mentioned 3 places. Targets were the White House, the Pentagon, and the World Trade Center. White House didn't get hit. So there's a great movie. It really hits the nerve. UA-93. It talks about the hijackings, and it talks about the World Trade Center getting attacked and the Pentagon getting struck. But it films it from the perspective of the passengers of UA-93. UA-93 went down in a cornfield in Pennsylvania because it was the last plane to take off. But these passengers were somehow, I don't know how, I don't remember. I watched the movie, but I don't know how much of the movie is to be believed, because like I said, it's a documentary based around people that did not live to tell the tale. So the only thing we can look at is the forensic experts or forensic stuff going on, or forensic backgrounding. But backgrounding, terrible grammar. But the story goes that on its way to the White House, the passengers got gutsy. They realized somehow, some way, they may have known that World Trade Centers were going off. They may have known that what was going on. But either way, they did try to retake the plane. And they did. And in the chaos, the plane just went down in a field in Pennsylvania. If you go there, if you go to that field now, there is a marker. There is a plaque commemorating them. And in doing so, it protected the White House. The funniest part about all that is, even if it would have got the White House, the president wasn't at the White House. It would have had very little military effect on on the issue that Osama bin Laden was trying to perpetrate, because George W. Bush, President George W. Bush at the time, was at a nearby school. I can't remember what he was doing. I remember seeing. So something that makes this personal to me is, now that we know what, the why, the how, the what does this mean to me? So, like I said, I remember this. I was 7 years old. No. Yeah, 6 years old. I was 6 years old when 9/11 happened. I was old enough to remember something wasn't right the day we woke up. Like, they let us home from school early, and came home. My parents were crying on the couch. My dad was home early. He was even teary-eyed. And I mean, I'm a 6-year-old kid. I don't know what the problem was, but I also know that something wasn't right. Like, it was a major deal. Because I remember waking up, or I remember coming home and looking out my window, because I have a beautiful view of Cincinnati from my house. At least we used to. They built a hospital behind us, so don't have it much anymore. But from my old bedroom, you would be able to see a beautiful view of Cincinnati. And I kept remembering, oh yeah, I live in a city like that. I live in it. That could be my town. And I would wake up every day on the news and see these towers blowing up and like the news footage of it, and freaked out, because that could have been my hometown. So that's what this event is to me. It's a little, like, I remember it, and it pisses me off to see that Americans now have forgotten that feeling, that unity that came from this event, because that's one of the best things in this nation that happened after 9/11. And let's get into that now, because I do want to talk about how it impacted America and how it's remembered. How it's remembered is unfortunately there's a lot of shade that's been thrown on how 9/11's been remembered. It's almost as if people forget that Americans died. I don't care while I talk about this theory, or while I talk about this topic, I'm also going to talk about conspiracy theories that are all along with that. I'm just going to mix the 2 points together, because how it affects America, or how it impacted America, also fed the conspiracy theories, and it also fed the doubt in the government. It fed the mistrust in the government that we now see today. And how it's remembered has mixed emotions for everybody, because let's just start with September 12th, 2001. We as a nation were united in mourning. This had been the first attack on American soil since the War of 1812. This was serious. Like, the world knew America was, like, at that point, if you were to tell, so let's take a step forward or backwards to, if you were to tell somebody on September 10th of 2001, hey, America's going to get attacked and there's nothing you can do to stop it, they would have laughed. Anybody from America would have laughed at you. We are the number one military. We were still the number one military. There's no way an event like that would happen on American soil from a foreign power. Now, I do have to be specific here. So there were major attacks, nothing near comparable to 3,000 deaths, but there were comparable attacks to what happened at World Trade Center. Even at the World Trade Center, you had the World Trade Center bombings, you had the Uvalde, or you had the Oklahoma City bombings, you had the Killdozer situation, you had all kinds of domestic terrorist stuff. Columbine happened by now. You had all kinds of other things that did happen, but those were domestic. Like, those were just wackos being wackos in the United States. Okay, that's a little different than telling an American on September 10th that a foreign power is going to invade America and blow up your most prominent building. Like, something that's funny to me is, and this is still on the topic of how it impacts America today, because if you watch any film from the 90s, 80s, the World Trade Center was a pretty, like, that, you knew you were, like, that was something that, like, if you watched a movie and you saw the World Trade Center in the movie, you knew that was New York. It was a center point of New York culture. It was a center point of American culture, because for a while they were the tallest buildings in the world. Yeah, they were designed by Japanese guys, but I'll ignore that. They did it on behalf of Americans, but they were a cultural center point, and I can't stress that enough, because people want to talk about Islamophobia that came afterwards. Yeah, that happened, and yeah, I'm aware that. So I do want to tread that lightly, because the American psyche is stupid, and I mean that with the most respect possible. The American psyche is not the brightest. So if you saw somebody walking down a street with a hijab or a prayer cap of any kind, they were attacked. Because unfortunately Americans are not, as a whole, and I don't want to. This is probably not a general American thing, but especially after you get told, hey, Muslims attacked towers, and then the pictures they show are people in robes, hijabs, and basic prayer caps. Any nation that has, or any culture that has those in their wearing, in their put the word right here. Anyway, the long beards, gowns, head caps. Hindu people were attacked. Some Jews were even attacked, because there are some in Jewish culture that are that do dress similarly to Islam. Very few. That was a very minor thing, but I just thought it was important to bring up, because everyone wants to talk about the Islamophobia that came afterwards. It's like, well, yeah, when the media for the years after that, like, I remember watching documentaries where pretty much they didn't specify what Muslim was. They didn't specify. All they said was, yeah, Muslims blew up the World Trade Center. You can't get mad at a culture for feeling that way when you, the media, when you, the Discovery Channel, when you, the History Channel, when you, legacy media people, are spilling that information out, and that's all the information you're giving. You're not talking about, I mean, the word radical Islam terrorist was so thrown around. Like, if you wanted a way to get Homeland Security's attention after 9/11, that's all you had to say was radical Muslim terrorist. You didn't even have to say terrorist. You just had to say radical Muslim, because unfortunately, of all the religions in the world, Muslim is the only radical religion that involves beheading people in the name of Muhammad, so you can get your 72 virgins, or blowing yourself up for it. Every other religion in the world does not have, like, if you're a radical Catholic, do you know what you're doing? You're going to church 3 or 4 times a week. You may be doing a sit-in at an abortion clinic. You may be doing, my favorite one is working at the parish kitchen to help feed the homeless. Like, that is your radical Catholic. Your radical Jew, he's not working on Sunday, like, at all. Like, they put the phone down, or I'm sorry, not Sunday, Saturday. I forgot their Sabbath is different from Christian Sabbath, but on Saturdays they are not doing anything. Like, they have Shabbat dinner. They're following the laws of the Leviticus pretty weird. They're not eating meat. Radical Judaism the book of the Torah does not tell you as a radical or as a fundamentalist, I should say, to go kill people, to eradicate. The Quran does. So don't give me the whole, I can see both sides of it. I understand how people came to hate it or how the Islamophobia came after 9/11, but don't sit here and try to tell me that it wasn't justified. Okay? You have extremist groups, even to this day. Every extremist military or every extremist terrorist group is in one way, shape, or form Muslim. The Westboro Baptist Church, maybe. Okay, I'll give the KKK some credit over here for being, the extreme Baptists and Protestants of the world, but they're not creating terrorist groups to. I'll put it even simpler. They're not strapping bombs to their kids to walk over to a Humvee to get as many kills as you can. Okay? They're not stoning their wives because they showed a leg, some skin from their leg. Okay? They're not stoning their daughters because their daughters decided to go to school one day or they accidentally picked up a book. See what I'm saying here? That's like, the Islamophobia was, in some ways, it was justified. Walking carefully here. It was justified if you knew what you were looking at. I feel bad for the Hindus, the Sheiks, the Jews, anybody of Arabian culture or Eastern culture that was attacked because of America's misunderstanding of that. That I feel sorry for. But don't ask me to feel sorry for recognizing an enemy as an enemy. I'm sorry. Now, how has it? Now, okay. Now that I got that 2 cents out, because I think that's an emotion shared by most Americans. All right, most of us that wanted to join the military, most of us that did join the military, were fueled by that. Remember 9/11. Remember the fallen. There was the Wounded Warrior Project. There was all kinds of good that came after 9/11 because it's like there was we see a big push in. It was a resurgence of patriotism that at least that I remember growing up. 2 or 3 times a year, like they would show the footage. You had veterans come in and talk about war. You had shows out that were just like it was a really growing point for not just the love of the nation, but also for like military history. Just fucking rocked, especially if you watched like History Channel growing up, like I did, Discovery Channel. They took this shit and ran with it. Like they knew what they were doing. I'm not gonna say what they did was good because they pretty much took a situation and they capitalized on it, like majorly. But 3,000 Americans died, and all you guys can do is think about how every September 11th you now get a boost in your ratings because you're showing this footage again, or even worse. And I'll talk about that in a minute. But having the adverse thoughts, the perversions of this, and we'll get into that in a minute. But how is it remembered today? So we live in a very anti-America society now, which is weird to me. And there are some people that say, like, there are some American. You go to a college today, those same fucking college students that are saying pro-Hamas, the same fucking kids that are calling for, that are pro-Hamas, calling for the death of Jews, will also tell you that they'll be the first ones to say 9/11 was an inside job. 9/11 was justified because they were educated. They read Bin Laden's letter to America, and they felt it was justified because America's not good. Blah blah blah. I can list off. I've heard. I went to college. I've heard these arguments before. How it's remembered today is it's a touchy topic. When I was in high school, when I was in grade school, no one ever really openly said that 9/11 was an inside job. No one ever once questioned that 9/11 was a touchy topic. No, you said, oh yeah, I remember 9/11. Let's go. Let's fucking go. Let's pro-America. All right, we were attacked. Okay, and now the war in Afghanistan was a result of we were being attacked. At least that's what we were told. We'll get into that in a minute, but that was the feeling of the world, or not sure. I shouldn't say the world, but of the United States. But now it's become such a fucking shit show of a topic because you have online posters, you have Illuminati posters, like Twitter. I can't. Now that it's September, I woke up this morning and without skipping a beat, the trolls were already posting 9/11 was an inside job. Jet fuel doesn't melt steel. No shit, it doesn't. Okay, I've worked in. Well, pace yourself. I will get to the conspiracy theories in a moment. But because I was gonna try to talk about them, but yeah. So it depends on how you were raised. Essentially, is how America remembers 9/11. So if you were raised in a moderate to conservative household, yeah, you're going to think of it as what it was, an attack on America. If you were raised in a radical left to progressive to even like the tinfoil hat houses or a sovereign citizens household family, you're going to think 9/11 was an inside job. You are going to think that it wasn't actually a plane that hit the Pentagon. It was a cruise missile. My favorite thing is nowadays people are trying to say that AI they actually hit the towers with cruise missiles, and then they went back and they AI'd planes over the over what the cruise missiles were. I know people that were there on that day. I know people that watched those towers fall. I know people that watched the planes hit those towers. If you were alive at this point, you watched the towers hit live. Like, when the second tower was hit, you saw it on live TV because there was already film crews there filming the first one. Like, you can go back and find the live footage of all this stuff. You can go back and see people's home recordings. So, yeah, that ends the topic on how it's remembered today. It's a shit show, unfortunately, and it's a big disgrace that it's a shit show. It's a shit show that the media's done a good job of being diverse. They always want to cater to whatever gets the clicks and stuff. And yeah, of course, 5 years after 9/11, they start focusing in on the Islamophobia, and then that feeds into, well, what else did we lie about? So then now you got all these people coming out saying, oh yeah, it was a cruise missile. Look at the damage there. Look at the let's get into the conspiracy theories, and this one's gonna hurt me more than I care to admit. I'm trying to be as partial to this, but it's hard to. So the number one conspiracy theory that people like to talk about is the Bush did it. Now, from a historian's point of view, I would not put this theory too far out of reality, because we have examples from history where American presidents or American militaries have let something happen as a way to justify us going into war. So, for example, the sinking of the Lusitania in World War I. We knew it had armaments on it. We knew that it was going to blow up if it got hit. And we had passengers on it. A situation where it can be alluded to like this, where America wanted to find a way to get involved in World War I, but it was for a different reason. Like, we knew that Europe needed our help, but the American public would never go for it, because us as Americans are naturally... So the fact that we love... The globalist America now is a very relatively new thing. Like, we're talking about that's even post 9/11, because the isolationist ideas really grew after 9/11 as well. So anytime that there's been a major conflict in the world, aka World War I, World War II, the Spanish-American War, that America's been involved in, there's been things that happened that, as a historian looking back, you can A plus B must equal C. Okay, that's a pretty decent equation if you're going for conspiracy mindset here. The sinking of the Lusitania, people think it was purposely overloaded so that because they knew they were getting hunted by submarines. They knew it was in submarine territory. It just, at that time, Germany had never been really attacked passenger vessels, and it was one of the few times that it was like a perfect shot. The first torpedo hit, and it hit the armory, right where all the hidden munitions were, and it blew up. But this was also the justification that America needed to go and get involved in the Great War. Now let's step forward. Or I'm sorry, you know what? Let's take a step back. Let's talk about the USS Maine. So the USS Maine may have been an accident. It was a ship that blew up in Cuba. It was an American vessel. A couple hundred sailors died, and that is the pinnacle point in which America got involved in the Spanish-American War, which they were itching for. America was itching for a reason anyway, because we knew we wanted the Monroe Doctrine, from sea to shining sea. We wanted Guam, we wanted the Philippines, we wanted Puerto Rico, we wanted these territories from Spain, and Spain as an empire was already dying, so it's not a fair fight, because or like another good example would be like me walking into an old folks home and winning the boxing match that they have. It was a dying empire. It was already on its deathbed, so America couldn't just go out and say, hey, yeah, woo, we're gonna take these, we're gonna invade. No, America doesn't work that way. We've always had okay, this is what we want, let's wait until the circumstances are perfect for us to get there. So the U.S. Maine very possibly could have just been an accidental explosion. It was a coal-fired, steam-engined warship. Cuba's known for its cigars. Fat Electrician did a great analogy on this. I can't not repeat it. It's a perfect. It could have been an accident. And on top of that, steam engines were notorious for accidentally blowing up. I hate to say it that way. Like, that's just what they did. Okay, that you get too much pressure built up and they will go boom. And if you're on a warship, that means munitions are going to go off. Sorry. But that was an example in 1898 where America used that to go full bore into war. Another time this happened, and this one's more conspiracy theory than the other two, because these other two we have definite facts for. But there is a theory that President FDR knew that Pearl Harbor was going to be attacked. That's why the military command had all the major ships, the aircraft carriers were not in port at Pearl Harbor. And also, they knew, they found there was a submarine that was sunk the day before 9/11, or not 9/11, the day before Pearl Harbor, that they just kind of wrote off as a one-off. Like, that was those were technically the first attack shots of America's involvement in World War II. Was us? I can't remember the name of the destroyer, but a U.S. destroyer sunk a Japanese submarine using depth charges, and that for some reason no bells were rung, nobody cared. They just thought it was a one-off thing. Okay. But FDR, like everything else in America, FDR wanted us to get involved in World War II. Our economy was trash. His policies, his NRA policies were not working. He knew that if he wanted to get America out of the Depression, he would have to get us into a total war situation, and we would have to win it. Because once a nation's at total war, factories are filling up. People are back to work. Soldiers are back in, like, people are if you were unemployed, what better way to get unemployed than join the military and go fight? Like, that's one of the justifications. And then there were all kinds of indicators, like, as I stated, we had the Philippines, we had control of all these other nations that it would have taken for Japan to pass en route to Hawaii, and yet nobody seemed to see anything. Nobody seemed to know anything. That's my conspiracy theory on that one. Is, were there warning signs ignored? Were there like I said, this takes a little spicy for me. But going back to the 9/11 issue, I would not put it past a sitting president to allow something to happen. Although tragic, would I say he did it? No, absolutely not. If you know anything about George Bush, you know he was kind of I won't say he was an idiot, but I also won't say that he was a great mastermind either. Okay, he was just I hate to say it this way, but he was a fighter pilot, good old Texan, like Texas boy. That's what he was. Rich, had a rich dad, or rich kid from a rich daddy mentality. Just, I would not put him in the most intelligent of American presidents. So, did he do it? No. But do I think he let it happen? Yes. Yes, he would have. Because at that time, we were already looking for some way to get involved in the Middle East. Just because of the chaos over there. It wasn't the first time in the Middle East. It wasn't the first time we had issues in the Middle East. We actually have been having issues with the Middle East since the 1970s and longer, because they just see America and they hate us. And after the Gulf War in '91, the American military was essentially paranoid about another regime rising like Saddam's in the Middle East. So if this was their way to kind of wiggle their way back into the Middle East, I could see it. Unfortunately, I could see it, but as tragic as that would be, it wouldn't surprise me, because we've seen it before in history. Another one of my favorite conspiracy theories that actually, we're only going to talk about 3 because there's a lot of them that can be easily debunked, and we're not going to get into it. But number 2, we're sticking to the inside job theory here, but the theory is that it was an inside job by corporations. Inside job by corporations, because there's just so sometimes things are a coincidence that I'm not one to believe that all coincidences are purposeful. Like, I won't be the first one to say I don't believe in coincidences, but I also won't be the first one to say, hey, sometimes things match up for a reason. But the issue I have here with this one is, because let's talk about why this theory has some validations. There were the specific areas in the World Trade Center were hit. Specific floors were, like, if you look at where the rooms were on the towers, and it's amazing what people have analyzed and done for this, and then see that they don't see through the fallacy of their own stuff. This was all perpetrated by Al Qaeda. Like, oh my God, but some people go as far as to say, well, they secretly paid for it. They say they paid through back channels and stuff. It's like, okay, whatever, boomer. The inside job theory really has me pissed off, because the Pentagon was struck, and it's wrecked. Like, the one of the main rooms that was absolutely destroyed when the Pentagon was the records room. And there was already some, I can't remember the name of the company, but there was a company that was getting sued by the U.S. government because falsifying records and like just embezzlement and all kinds of other stuff. That was one company. I can't remember the name of the company. I'm sorry, forgive me. But that was one major thing. And then if you look at where the World Trade Center was hit, it was another financial company that just so happened to not go bankrupt after it was on the verge of bankruptcy, but then once 9/11 happened, it did not go bankrupt, which was also the owners of the building. So that's what feeds into this, is that this was all a big insurance claim, but I don't buy that one. Way too many people died, way too much damage happened. If you wanted to target specific things to make it happen, first of all, you wouldn't go to the Middle East and hire some goat fuckers to do that. Okay, there's a lot smarter people in America that could have done it. But I rest my case on that one. And my third and final one that pisses me off the most, because I've worked in the metal industry all my life. I know metal pretty well. I know what it can do, what it can't do. I've seen what it takes to make metal warp. I've made it happen myself. I did try blacksmithing a little bit, so I kind of got an understanding of this. Jet fuel does not, and this saying pretty much sums up every conspiracy theory, because this was the video. I remember when this came out and was on YouTube, when YouTube first came out. This guy he poured jet fuel on an iron beam. If we can find the footage, I'll have Allie put it up. But the theory is that this guy, in the most redneck, not even trying way, just poured jet fuel on a steel beam and lit it on fire. And was like, oh, it didn't melt it. No, of course it didn't fucking melt it. Okay, so of course it didn't melt it. Because there's also a thing called pressure and fire and backdraft, and there's all kinds of variables that you didn't take into consideration in that little experiment of yours that now has the internet on fire, because all of these conspiracy theories that I just, like what I mentioned, and then all the other ones that I haven't mentioned, they fuel from this stupid video that shows, oh, how could the building have collapsed the way it did? Well, one of my other favorite ones is, along with the jet fuel, they're like, well, look the way it collapsed. It almost looks like a demolition charge, like when you see a demo building go down. I'll get to that, why that's not possible, in a minute too. But the jet fuel thing really bugs me, because the guy didn't even put any effort into his goddamn video. Like, he could have added weight to it to show, because when you're done, when you look at footage of 9/11 of recaps, and you look at 9/11 like footage of what was the rubble and stuff, you see twisted metal. You see metal that literally looks like it was melted. Well, newsflash, I don't know who doesn't know this, or find a metallurgy expert to back me up on this. Metal does melt. It doesn't melt. It twists. It does warp. Look at, and it doesn't take heat to do it. Weight itself, if a beam has been knocked out of place, the weight of the building itself will twist and warp that steel. That is a fact. Weight, like, how do you think we form metal in the metal industry? You use weight. We have a 3-ton press. It's actually might be more than that, but a 3-ton press will form 1/2-inch metal, and most I-beams are anywhere from 1/2 inch to 1 inch thick, and that is structural grade. I'm sorry, that's a fact. Now, let's take this and let's paint this picture, okay? And again, I don't mean it. This is not to disrespect anybody that passed away during this situation. This is me trying to explain to the idiots out there how the beams looked the way they did, because clearly a lot of you guys did not pay attention in chemistry. So when something like a bombing or a, God forbid, a plane hits it again, you've completely destroyed the structure of the structural integrity of the building. And it didn't help that the way that the two towers were designed, they were essentially hollow in the center. Like, everybody knows that a skyscraper normally has the elevators in the center that run top to floor, or floor level to top level. That should be pretty common knowledge. If not, should have taken more gen eds. Sorry. It's pretty common knowledge that when you have a skyscraper, modern skyscraper, they build it, essentially the elevator shaft is built first, and then all around it is the rest of the building. That's pretty common knowledge. Unless you're doing like a hotel or something, the elevators go to the one side, which I've seen before. That's not important to what we're talking about. But what happens is, so say for example, plane goes through building. Structural integrity of that top has now fallen. Like, you've taken out floors, you've taken out support beams, you've taken out all this other, and everyone's like, well, there was no massive explosion outside of what, like if you watch a movie, it should have just been. There was a slight one, and you saw it, but that was most likely from the jet fuel that was in the planes and in the engines, igniting from hitting a bunch of steel and scraping and creating sparks. That happens. Which, when that happens, there is going to be fire. And if you listen to any report of the firefighters that were there, there was a fire. Like, the building was on fire. And I see video of people over here like showing sparks flying and whistling. Like, and they call it a thermite. Oh my God, that's proof of thermite. No, it's not proof of thermite. Some building materials are incredibly, incredibly flammable. Like, that insulation is not the best. It's actually terrible. And on top of that, if you have like loose wires, power couplings, grounded wires, they're gonna spark. I'm sorry. That little video of the thermite splitting or spitting out doesn't prove a goddamn thing to me, because I know that that could have been anything. So now we ask, okay, if the jet fuel didn't melt the steel beams, what made the beams melt? They didn't melt. Going back to the main point here, they did not melt. It was literally just the pressure of the building and the fire weakening the structure that allowed it to collapse. And then once, it's like dominoes. Once you lose one main, it could have just been a handful of beams that were like, that was it. That was because the building was also, so I shouldn't say it was older. It was built it started being built in the 60s. They got finished, I believe, in 74. I'll put the correct date somewhere here. But the building was aged. You got to take that into consideration, because yes, it's steel. Yes, it's being used with concrete, steel, reinforcements. You would think that stuff's strong and stuff. It's not. Okay? I can take an I-beam to work and I can fold it in half with enough pressure. That is a fact. If I had a 10-ton press that I probably wouldn't even need that. If I took a beam, took it to work, I could fold it in half. You cannot convince me that the weight of the building collapsing, floors collapsing in on each other, did not have that effect, especially when you get further down, because if for anybody that watches the footage, you see that the building pretty much caves in and collapses. It caved in to the elevator shafts. That's what I was getting at with talking about the elevator shaft, because some people say, "Oh, it looks like a demolition." You're right, it does, because the weight of everything going down is it's literally think of it this way: weight comes down, stops for a moment, floor can't handle it, weight falls down again, can't handle it, weight falls down again. The weight of the building is literally collapsing itself in because it's lost its structural integrity. Like that shouldn't be a hard concept for people to understand. But everybody wants to think but again, this goes back to, now that we're done with the theories, let's wrap around to where we talked about the theories I want to talk about, and hopefully I've convinced some of you disproof of it. Now, as to whether Bush did it or not, or allowed it to happen, or whatever, I don't want to touch that topic. I have mixed feelings on that myself, because that I would like to see how history plays that out for myself, whether he allowed it to happen or not. But did he orchestrate it? Probably not. Because we were something I do want to finish this point off. Bush could not have done it because there was no way in hell Bin Laden would have worked with him on that. Because if you read the letter to America, the same evidence these people use to glorify Bin Laden also clears Bush of being directly involved, because he hated Bush. He hated the ideals of the West. There was no way he would have worked with us to destroy us. I told you earlier he was a master manipulator, but he was also a fundamentalist. He would have lost the respect of his own men if that ever came out to be. Because that's, again, put yourself in 8th century barbarian mindset here. Tribalism is a real thing. Like, what holds the tribe together is the leader. If the tribe itself loses faith in the leader, there's no way that the leader will have any power. Which is why putting your 8th century barbarian cap on, Bin Laden would have never done that, because he knew he needed the trust of his fighters. He needed the trust of what was left of the Mujahideen, of Al Qaeda, the Taliban. He needed the trust of everybody for this to work. If it ever came out that Bush helped him, his whole movement, his whole argument would have been done. It's plain and simple. Now, the inside job, don't put much faith in that one. I don't believe in the C4, the detonation. I don't believe in any of that. And I think when talking about the jet fuel situation, I think we pretty much covered why the building went down the way it did. I think I pretty much explained how the events that played out allowed that type of situation to happen. So, in conclusion, let's take a step back, breathe, at least for my sake, breathe. God, this is going to be a long episode. The way it's remembered today is unfortunate, and instead of being remembered as 3,000 Americans died, someone had to pay for it. Luckily, in 2011, Obama was able to stand up on TV and say, "We got him." May 12th. I remember where I was in that day too. I was in college, and not college. I was in high school, and my history professor actually had the news on, because he said it was something for us worth remembering. And I give Mr. Reed, if you watch my stuff, give you a lot of credit for that. That was fun, but shout out to you. That I think, and even that, so can't even talk about that without talking about some controversy, because there are people that believe that Bin Laden's not actually dead. So, God, we are stupid as a culture. It's a tragic event that has been bastardized by the internet. It's been bastardized by the media. It's been bastardized by people living in their basements who never go outside and touch grass, because like 3,000 people died, and it was a horrible thing. But all anybody can ever think about is themselves, and how do I turn this into my advantage? How can I spin some theory about this so that way people pay attention to me? Shut the fuck up, okay? People died. We just need to get over it and mourn the losses. Because there's some families here, like, something that most people don't tell you, the reason why that number, so when I was doing the research for this, the casualty rate is from 6,000 to 250,000. And the reason for that is because there's a lot of bodies to this day that have not been recovered. The important thing is people died, and now everybody just wants to make a joke out of it. And I know some people say, well, I do this because I care. No, you don't. You don't do it because you care. You do it because you want the internet clicks. You want to be that, ooh, I'm edgy. Shut the fuck up, okay? People died. How they died is tragic. And whether the circumstances was, people died, and then more people died. Another 3,000 people died. Actually, less than that, because if I remember reading right, in the time we were in Afghanistan, so from kickoff point in 2003 to 2020, we lost just a little under 28,000 total. I'll put the correct number somewhere here. Versus what we lost at 9/11. And no, I'm not counting the terrorists in that number. We lost less people in the 20-year war that we fought to find and restabilize and pretty much make sure that 9/11 doesn't happen again than we did on the day of 9/11. So if people want to sit here and yell at me and argue, like, how can you ignore this? How can you ignore that? How can you ignore the possibility? I won't ignore the possibility, but I don't think it's important at this point. Unfortunately, Afghanistan has been put back into chains and is ran by 8th century barbarians once again because of our terrible president and possibly the one that might be our next president, Miss Kamala Harris, who claims she had nothing to do with it, but yet when it was going on, she was all for she had something to do with it. Don't get me... Ugh. Very angry episode today. So, with all that said, hopefully I can shed some light, and hopefully I'm trying my best to remember this in the most respectful way for the dead, for the American families that are still suffering because they never actually found their loved one. He's just a tally mark on the wall of remembrance down in New York City. So with all that said, as always, keep your head on a swivel. Watch your six.
We lit up your world like the 4th of July. Hey, Uncle Sam, put your name at the top of his